Hello and welcome to Matcha Mornings, part of the Wander Barn Podcast Network. I'm your host, Amanda Kingsmith, and I'm excited to dive deep on topics around holistic health, the power of food, hormone health, how the practices of yoga can impact our health and well-being, and much more. So grab your cup of tea, settle in, and let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome back for another episode of Matcha Mornings. I am so excited that you've decided to join me for today's episode of the show. Today on the podcast, I am very excited to be joined by Kay Hutchison. Kay is a content creator with extensive experience in radio, television, and publishing. After gaining her Bachelor of Music and her Master of Arts in Music at Glasgow University, she joined Decca Records in London and then BBC Radio as a producer. From there, she moved into television and went on to lead the launch teams for Disney TV and Channel 5. Now, you might be wondering what on earth that has to do with health and wellness. Well, she is also the author of My Life in 37 Therapies. And so on this episode of the show, Kay and I dive into that. We dive into mental health awareness. We dive into stress awareness because let's face it, 2020 has been chaotic. It's been hectic. It's been stressful. There's so much uncertainty. And I felt like it was really nice to connect with somebody who could talk about slowing down, the importance of different types of therapies and how that can impact our body and our mind. And on top of that, Kay's Scottish accent is so soothing. I felt so relaxed by the end of this episode. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. And without further ado, here is Kay. Welcome to the podcast today, Kay. I'm really excited to have you here with me.
I'm absolutely delighted to be here, all these miles away.
Yeah. Where in the world are you joining me from today?
So I know that I don't sound as if I'm English. I'm actually Scottish, but I am actually talking to you from Kent, England today. But I'm a very Scottish person.
Amazing. What took you from Scotland over to England?
Well, I think there were more jobs, and actually my career was all in TV and media. And I always, ever since I was a tiny child growing up in Scotland, wanted to work for the BBC. And the only way that you could really do that in those days was to actually get a job in London, in the centre, and actually get proper training from the BBC. So that's what I did. And I trained as a music producer. And I then moved over to TV and did the launch. I mean, I ended up doing the launches of a couple of big channels in the UK, including Disney TV, the first non-US Disney channel in the UK, and Channel 5, and I also worked at Channel 4, and then ended up back at the BBC, but doing a bigger job as Director of Partnerships for one of the big divisions there. So to cut a long story short, that's why I ended up in England, and I never really left, although I spent a lot of time travelling up and down to see family in Scotland. I think once you get settled with a partner and with a life and friends where you work, that becomes your home.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, they're both beautiful countries, and I'm already fascinated by your background, having worked in, TV and music production and stuff like that. So that's really interesting. And I'm curious, when did you first start practicing yoga, and how does your yoga journey kind of fit into your professional journey?
Well, I had always done a little bit of yoga ever since I'd come down to London, but it tended to be, if there was a class that everyone went to with work, after work or something like that. And it was very much a kind of hobby and something that I did and found quite difficult because actually there's so many different styles of yoga. And if you're not really studying it, it's quite hard, I think, at first to work out which one is right for you. Because I think you can do a blend of the different techniques. But for me, it didn't really become that important until, several years later when I discovered that going through a difficult time in my life when I'd actually lost my mother to cancer, and my partner ended up getting cancer not long after she died. I had a bit of a difficult time, and I found myself really looking for things that would help me get back on track mentally and physically. And it was really at that time where I actually ended up finding myself completely living on my own. I won't, go into all the details, but I was actually living alone, had a lot of time when I wasn't working hard. And I found that yoga was just an absolute oasis for me. And I became more and more interested in it as a kind of therapy, I guess, to help me sort of combat the difficulties that I was going through. I mean, it's also why I decided to write a book about that time, because I was trying lots of different things. But yoga seemed to be the foundation, because it enabled me to keep physically healthy as well as mentally, and actually spiritually as well, something that really hadn't been part of my life beforehand, because I was so busy working so hard and harder. My response to all those difficulties at first was to throw myself into work. And sometimes that isn't the best thing for you. So I found yoga, it managed to plug back into me all of the nourishment that I needed and that I had not been able to do anything about before then. So yoga became an important part of my life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I love hearing that. And I can relate so much to what you're talking about. And, even now as a practitioner and a teacher, I have to remind myself sometimes that when I'm stressed or I'm going through, some personal or professional stuff, I need to take myself out of work, because I definitely have that tendency of just throwing myself into work as well. And I'm really fascinated. I know your book's called My Life in 37 Therapies, and I'm curious, can you talk a little bit about the different therapies you tried and kind of why it's yoga that's kind of, I guess, come out on top? I don't know if that's the best way to say that, but been something that's been really impactful throughout your lifetime?
Yeah, well, I think in some ways it's one of the most normal. But some of the things I tried: homeopathy and astrology, reiki and sonic therapy, past life regression, shamanic retreats. I went on an Ayurvedic retreat to India as well, where I practiced yoga there with the most amazing yoga teacher. I must just tell you about that too, because I had been beginning to wear glasses before I went on that trip. He gave us these exercises for our eyes. And I mean, we did them every single day that we were there. It was like 10 days. When I came back, my eyesight was perfect. I didn't need glasses. And I suddenly realized that the power of yoga to make everything work and function well was actually so clearly demonstrated by that one small thing. But I think some of some odder ones as well. I did hypnosis and voodoo. And these things, I think once I started becoming interested in therapies, and I was obviously a little bit vulnerable at the time as well, and not really sort of feeling very balanced. I was just fascinated by finding out what could these things reveal to me about why things had gone wrong. And it was really a seeking something, some resolution, some kind of, really I was looking for the reason as to why my life sort of all fell apart. Everything kind of went wrong for me at the same time. And I think yoga was one of the things that made me realize that what had gone wrong is that I was kind of running on empty, and I was treating myself a bit like a machine, just doing more and more work. I think many, many women have the same experience as you were saying. Sometimes we actually forget that we're a human being and that we need to actually give something back to ourselves physically and mentally in order to do things out in the world for other people and just to survive and get through life. I think that some of the therapies that I did were quite extreme. I did colonic irrigation, and I did something called esoteric breast massage, which is exactly what you're thinking. But I think that, in a way, they all had a kind of philosophy behind them, or a sort of set of thinking behind it. Like in Reiki and reflexology, it's all about getting rid of trapped energy or blocked energy in your system and making sure that everything works well. And I think what I always came back to was that yoga always does those things as part of the whole practice is about making sure that everything works well, whether it be mind, body, or spirit. And so I think it combines a lot of the positive benefits of other therapies in one place. And I tend to really, really like the people that I meet in yoga as well, because they have a wonderful outlook on life and they're looking for the same sort of things and same sort of positive effect that yoga does. And I think at the moment, because we're all going through such difficult times, it reminds me of me going through that time when I was quite isolated and alone and feeling very, very unbalanced. It's very like that today with COVID-19 and the effects of being shut away, and you have to rely on yourself to do the things that you know are healthy for you, eating well, exercising well. And I do think that having been through that experience before, I feel more able to cope with what's going on just now, because it's a very strange time, very odd. But yoga's just. I also think that yoga at the moment is. I'm approaching it in a different way. So I would go to many classes, and I would practice yoga myself, but also in 3 formal professional classes every week. And now I'm doing it differently because I'm doing things on Zoom, and I'm also practicing myself. But I'm finding that I need to do everything much more slowly. And the wonderful thing is we've got more ability to do things slowly and really think about the movements and the positive thinking that I think yoga promotes. So I'm giving you lots there, but I hope I answered your question about the therapies in my book.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You definitely did. And it's amazing to hear that yoga has been something that's been so profound in your life and continues to be, particularly during this time. And kind of interesting when you kind of, tune into the different, I guess, like feelings that you might have within your body and your mind, and kind of listening to that. And that's a lot of what I've been trying to do throughout this, is just listen to my body. If there's a day where I feel exhausted, it's not the day to do a high intensity workout. It's the day to, sit in child's pose for 10 minutes and just really ground down and breathe and feel through that, or maybe do a meditation or something like that, versus the days where I feel like I'm totally stir crazy and I need to get on my mini trampoline and bounce for a couple of minutes to kind of exert that energy. So it is kind of interesting to just follow our patterns through that and try to tune into that a little bit more. And then also be gracious with ourselves as we do it, since we are, very much in a crisis still.
I wonder if this is going to happen. I mean, obviously there are lots of benefits out there to this happening. There's silver linings in the lack of pollution, some, let's not say all, but some governments and, politicians and countries pulling together at this time. But I wonder if also, because I certainly feel that I'm more in touch with my own body and what it needs than ever before. I mean, I've been doing yoga for many, many years all over the world, different classes, different styles, different teachers. And I don't think I have ever been more connected with what I need physically than now, because I've been able to spend that time and do more slow practice. And I don't know, I think that's a kind of lovely thing if yoga is actually giving that to me at the moment and actually allowing me to listen a bit more to what my body needs. I think actually that's quite a nice thought that you've made me have.
No worries. Happy to provide that insight. And yeah, I think you're totally right. And it is interesting to kind of tune into that. And something else that I think is interesting is that we're kind of going through this pandemic during, and obviously these months are kind of just random, but April's been dedicated as Stress Awareness Month. May, which we're currently in at the time of recording, is Mental Health Awareness Month. And I think more than ever, we've needed to tune into awareness of stress and awareness of mental health. And being stuck at home has, many, many challenges. And I think one of them is just feeling totally cooped up in many different ways and needing, of course, to take care of our physical health through movement, breath, nutrition, sleep, enough water. But it's also our mental health is a big, big part of this. I'd be curious if you can kind of touch on that based on your experience through, writing your book and just your experience through your lifetime.
Well, I think talking about mental health, I think the actual writing of the book was actually a very important and somewhat cathartic time. I mean, I know lots of people say at the moment, if you're feeling that you're very challenged mentally at the moment, sometimes it is good to actually write down your ideas and what you're expressing. I mean, my book is it's full of what you'd expect, because it's partly a guide, it's also a memoir. So it actually tells the story of my life through all of the therapies that I tried, because this time that I describe in the book was a time where I had to look back over my life, my childhood and my upbringing for answers to why overworking had stopped working for me, and that I think my body had just literally shut down. I'm hearing from nutritionists quite a lot at the moment that sometimes when you're overloaded with whatever it is, and it could be the effects of COVID-19, it could be a breakdown in your life, that actually it is important to find the things that make you feel better. And I do think that, so I wrote the book, I experienced all these different therapies. Some of them worked for me, some of them didn't, but from each of them I learned something. And I also went to a psychotherapist. In fact, I went to five different ones for lots of different reasons, partly because I was moving around, but also because we actually have the NHS over here, and I had to wait a very long time on a waiting list to get to see one. So I went to see one while I was waiting for that. And I think what was great about that is that, it was very clear to me that everybody, it doesn't matter who you are, we have mental health problems at some point in our lives, that it's actually a normal part of life. It comes and goes, and you just have to be aware when things get really bad. And I think what was wonderful about having this month where there was a lot of focus on mental health awareness is that one of the key things is to try and be aware of when you're having ordinary, anxiety, and when it gets too much. And I think during the time that I was writing, the time that I was writing about, there were times where I was really quite on the edge and feeling very unhappy with life and not really thinking that there would be any way out of this, and or I couldn't see a way out of this. And so when I hear about people saying that they've found things really, really difficult, I actually know what they're meaning now. And I think you've got to find the thing that's right for you. I know for a fact that in the years that I've been practicing yoga, for example, when I first started going, there was no men at all in any of the classes. And now it's really not like that. It's much more opened up. But there are still some people who really, it doesn't work for them, and you just have to accept that. You have to accept that we're all different, and for some people it will never work. but I can definitely say that yoga really sustains me and makes me feel renewed, I think, is how I feel after I have done something. And there are so many ways to practice it and so many different teacher styles. And I learn from every single one a different message. And, there are some who talk about what's going on in the world this time. It might be the seasons. It might be about reconnecting with nature. And others are much more interested in the movement and the kind of accuracy of the technique. I think what's great is you've got to find what works for you. And people who have said to me in the past, oh, yoga doesn't work for me, I keep saying to them, try another class, try a different one, because there's bound to be one that will suit you. And then if you've given it your best shot, we'll try a different therapy, go have a massage, or it might be having some psychotherapy. It might be having some reiki done on your body, or it might be reflexology on your feet. That's another one, which can be wonderful for people who don't really like to be touched very much. So they're happy to have their feet manipulated to get rid of all the tensions in their system. So I think mental health, this month has been really good for shining a light on things. But we've got to remember that next month, it hasn't solved all the problems. The problems are probably still there, but we have to encourage people to be open about it and talk about it and deal with it if it gets out of hand and they can't deal with it themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Hey everyone, we're just taking a quick break from the show to talk about energy bits. Energy bits are spirulina tablets made of one ingredient, algae. Nothing added, nothing subtracted, just 100% plant-based algae nutrition. No sugar, no caffeine, no gluten, no soy, no additives, no GMOs, no preservatives, no binders, nothing artificial. Just 100% algae, 100% green, 100% healthy, and 100% pure. Pure and simple, the way food should be. They have high protein, high beta carotene, high iron, high chlorophyll, high antioxidants, and over 40 plus vitamins, including the B vitamins. They have electrolytes, including magnesium, potassium, and are a great source of essential fatty acids. Honestly, I could go on and on and on about how great energy bits are for you, and that's why I've decided to partner with them. If you want to learn more about energy bits or order some yourself, you can head on over to energybits.com to learn more. Use the code WANDERBARN to get 20% off your order. Once again, that's energybits.com and use the code WANDERBARN for 20% off your order. All right, back to the episode. And so I'm curious, I think a lot of people listening understand very clearly like the benefits of yoga and know how it makes them feel. And, we've talked about some great ways to kind of slow things down for students. I'm curious, like for our own mental health and particularly during this crisis, what are some other modalities or types of therapy or ways that we can, start tuning in and making sure that we're taking care of our mental health?
Well, I do actually think that if you can find the form of sonic therapy that works for you best, then that is a really good way to relax the mind and relax the body. And it doesn't really matter what that is. I do love the music of Liz Addison, and I do love the sound of, sonic gongs and I love a gong bath. There's nothing better, and you can get gong baths online. Mm-hmm. There's something about the audio that kind of reaches the whole of your body. I did actually do a sonic therapy session when I went to a wonderful place in Spain called Kali Yoga, and they had a range of therapies available, and one of them was sonic therapy. So to actually go to sonic therapists who's trained in actually helping you with the stuck energy in your system, and actually making everything work beautifully is great, because of course all of the cells in your body are made up of liquid, and the sonic energy, the sound waves that come from the gongs. They had crystal bowls, they had little bells, little chimes, little Tibetan, brass bells to put together, which we're all of us aware of. But the way that was manipulated to make the energy flow and actually vibrate at the right and natural vibration was just the most incredible experience. But you can get a lot of those experiences online at the moment. And the other thing, which I think I would always recommend, but it's not for everyone, is complete silence. If you can find complete silence. I did actually go on a 10-day silent retreat over Christmas one year, when I just had enough and I needed to get away from all the biz and the chaos of Christmas. And I spent 10 days with 50 other, it was all women group, learning how to meditate. And it was called Vipassana Meditation. And that's where you focus on the tiny, tiny circulating of the blood around your body, right to the very tips of your toes and your hands. And you can literally feel the blood flowing around your body. And the silence that you get from actually stopping your mind thinking about anything other than yourself. And I know we can do it with breathing, but the body circulation one is really quite special. I had 10-hour days of meditation and all wonderful vegetarian food, and not very much food after 4:00 when that was dinner, and we had 2 pieces of fruit for dinner. Apart from that, we really had herbal teas. We had a proper lunch, but there was nothing to eat after that, and it was just the meditation. It helped us sleep properly. 10 days of silence without talking to anyone or looking at anyone. You weren't allowed to look at anyone in the face to discourage communication of any type. We had a little bit of time outside, but most of the time it was over Christmas in England, so you can imagine it wasn't brilliant weather.
Yeah, it's not the best time to be outside.
So we were in this meditating hall really for 10 full days. When I stopped, and it was quite funny because I was leaving. It was the most wonderful place that I went to. I couldn't believe it. When I left, I got my checkbook out, and the woman said to me, you only need to pay if you can pay. If you can't pay, you don't have to, which I thought was just so wonderful and totally in the spirit of kind of yoga and all these kind of giving spiritual practices. And I found it really difficult to speak because I was rusty after not speaking for a whole 10 days, not even to myself. But the silence was so special, I didn't really want it to stop. So if at the moment, if there's a way that you can take yourself off and either be in nature or just sit on your own without anyone else around, no distractions, get rid of everything. Silence is a very easy one. Well, it's not easy, actually. It's not easy, but it's a very good way of calming your whole self by stilling everything inside. So sonic therapy, silent therapy. Let me see, what else can I think of? One of the best ones is staring up into the sky, looking at the sky. It's amazing how grounding that can be. And if you can sit in a nice shavasana and look up at the sky like that, well, I know that you will feel calm very quickly. But a lot of the therapies that I tried, you can't be practiced at the moment because many of them are about physical touch. And so we just have to work around those at the moment. To be honest with you, I love classes in yoga, but it's a very nice experience to do yoga on your own as well. I actually quite like it on a Zoom meeting, because sometimes you can start if there's something that you know is actually a really good stretch. It might be in your hips, it might be in your shoulders, it might be in your neck. Sometimes in a class, you're not able to do to stop to check out those bits of tension, but at the moment you can if you're on your own. I think maybe the answer is to have a mix, because I miss the people. The people in the yoga classes I go to are just such lovely souls, such lovely individuals. I do miss them more than anything.
Yeah, I 100% feel all of that. And I think, with the studios that I've been working with, we've tried to be starting the Zoom room, 10 minutes early and giving them 5 or 10 minutes after. And so that, just encouraging open conversation the same way we would have in the studio. And I think that's been a really nice.
Wonderful. Yeah, so
Yeah,
I don't have that. I really think I should suggest that, because that's really making the practice more valuable and more, I think, more effective. Good for you.
Yeah, it's been really important for the community, but I totally understand what you're saying. I mean, I've been practicing online as well, and I kind of really love the idea that I can show up on my mat, my sweatpants, and maybe an oversized sweater, and then if I get warm, I can just take my sweater off, and it doesn't matter that I'm in baggy sweatpants and a sports bra because I'm at home. I mean, I can show up in my pajamas if I want, and
yes.
I think there's a certain level of that, that's always been moderately appropriate in a yoga studio. But I think a lot of, what I've noticed in yoga studios is it becomes a lot about, the cute little yoga clothes you're wearing. And that's not what yoga is about. So I think that this is a cool opportunity for people to kind of tune back into, really what serves them. And then similarly, I mean, as a teacher, I have a pretty, solid home practice. And I've loved being able to modify maybe the classes, getting pushed in directions that I might not normally take myself, because I certainly love that. But then also being this isn't serving me right now. I'm going to do this instead. And it's not weird and it's not offensive because nobody knows what I'm doing because I'm on Zoom. So
Yeah.
I totally agree with that.
I do miss the teachers that I go to as well, because I think on Zoom it's much more difficult for them, because they're having to perform to show you what's needed. It's much more difficult for them to keep an eye on what you're individually doing as a class, because they're seeing these different, little screens of all these different people. And I find, and actually we have had some problems with Zoom just recently, because I think they're probably just so successful that they've got too many people on the system and it can't
Yeah,
cope.
I think their bandwidth is being tested a little bit.
It certainly is. But I miss the kind of interaction that you get. And one of the classes that I go to here, and I'm in Tunbridge Wells in Kent, and there's some really good, it's quite funny because I go to one that's very, very kind of sort of old school yoga, and I go to one that's a gym that does yoga lessons. And it's so funny because you're absolutely right. There are a lot of people who are really, really dressed up when they go to the gym, and you just sort of think, but actually the whole thing about yoga is to be, well structured but relaxed. And actually some of the things that you wear actually aren't conducive to relaxing. Some of them got very, very sort of tight things on, and I think you need relaxation. And I loved what you were saying. I mean, I think there is something at the moment called pajama yoga, isn't there? Because
yeah, I'm sure that's a thing.
We're able to be so totally relaxed and just let everything go, and that is a different experience. I'm not saying I won't go back to these. I love them. I like the variation, but I think there's something nice about what we're learning and adding to our practice at home in our pajamas.
Yeah, 100%. And so we've talked about yoga as a great way for mental, physical health. You mentioned Vipassana, which is something I'm familiar with, but haven't actually done. It really intimidates me, but maybe you've kind of made me think about maybe there's ways that I can bring this into something where I'm in a comfortable space like my home, but be able to practice this because I love the idea of, being in silence and intentional silence at that and being able to reflect from that. Are there any other modalities or forms of therapies that you recommend or suggest that could be really beneficial for mental health and particularly right now?
Well, not many that you can do on your own unless the one thing that's absolutely amazing about massage is that, yes, you can't give yourself a back massage, but somebody can in your household. And the other thing is that you can do a lot of, simple massage, which is relaxing yourself with maybe some lovely oils like bergamot or chamomile just into your feet and your legs. It's extremely relaxing and actually helpful to the circulation in your limbs if you spread a little bit of the essential oils that's actually I would definitely make sure you're using the right products and you're not make sure that you've got something that's meant to go on the skin, but actually massaging into the base of your foot and your toes and your ankles, it's just the most wonderful feeling. So you don't need to go to anyone for that. You can do a lot of these things yourself. And I think especially at the moment too, because we're having to wash our hands far too much. And it's really, really important that we protect our skin. And I'm finding myself putting a lot of beautiful creams and oils on my hands at night. And that, just massaging that into your hands, which we use a lot in yoga and our wrists and everything, is actually very, very helpful and relaxing. My favorite thing is really acupuncture, but it will be a while, I think, before anyone can practice that. Maybe not. Maybe it will come back. And Indian head massage, I do sometimes ask my partner to do that because that can be the most amazing experience. It's just not the same doing it yourself. You have to have someone else doing it. Mm-hmm. But I think there are other things which I've quite enjoyed finding a little bit of time for. And I must be honest, it's a little bit of time because we're still working. And I think a lot of us are working in a really kind of odd way because people are tense. So phone calls and communication is not as good as it should be. But I also think that, we're actually, some of us, doing more work. So you have to be very, very careful to carve out some time for yourself to do other things. So I have been looking at different therapies that I will be trying when we come out of lockdown. So I've been looking at, there are some things, there's something called Rolfing, which is about the connectivity of all, between all of the muscles and connecting to your whole system. It's about relaxing that whole thing. I'm looking forward to trying that. It was invented, like 50 years ago, and it's very, very popular here now. And I haven't got round to that one, so I will. I'm just looking at my list because in the back of my book, I've got a list of every single therapy that I did. So acupunctures, I take the word therapy in its very widest sense. So if you look at the definition of therapy, it's anything that makes you feel better or heals you from some condition. It could be an illness. So, there's astrology in there, and that sounds like a very strange one, but that allowed me to look at my childhood and the things that I had made up my mind about in my childhood very differently from, I think as you begin to get into your sort of, 30s, you begin to think about life and your parents very differently. Ayurvedic medicine. I did, as I say, craniosacral or healing therapy. But these are ones that you have to be with someone for. Cupping. I don't know if you've tried cupping, but that again is about relieving tension in tight muscles. It's the strangest experience because you can actually feel the skin of your back lifting up into the clear glass globes, the heat. But wow, after that's finished, the experience is wonderful. It's like you've had a 3-hour massage or something like that. Guided meditations. I mean, I'm sure we've all tried these, but it's really important to find one where you really connect with the voice that you're hearing. So, I had to ditch a whole lot that had weird accents, even for me, that were just too stilted or to overlay saying these kind of, just sort of creating a story that just seemed so over the top. You have to find one that works for you. I actually adore, one of the classics is Eckhart Tolle. And actually, when I listen to his meditations or even his conference talks to people listening, he's just such a calm person, but he's funny as well in a really nice way. And I think the power of laughter at this time is really, really important. Some of the best yoga teachers that I've ever had have a just wonderful sense of humor and can, if we're all, it's quite funny because, in a yoga class, how you can get quite serious about it and really strain to do things. And then suddenly your teacher will say, right, a little bit of a smile, I think, everyone here to remind you to relax. And sometimes, you might even get a joke. I think guided meditations can be hugely helpful. I think find the right voice for you and the right duration, because some of these things go on for hours, and who's got hours to spend on a guided meditation?
I know, even in quarantine, I don't.
Yeah, I like a little 5-minute one. So my routine is yoga first thing in the morning, in my PJs, yoga last thing at night, followed by 5-minute guided meditation or some music to send me off to sleep. Let's have a think what else is in there. Shamanic Retreat, that was a very odd one. We did actually do yoga. I went to the Sahara Desert and we lived in basically out. We just slept out on the dunes at night in our sleeping bags, and we had shamanic meditations. We went all the way. It's wonderful sleeping under the stars. We went right into the center of the most ancient of pyramids in Cairo. And we had a meditation right at the center. Once we'd walked down through all this labyrinth of tunnels and shafts, we eventually appeared in the very, very middle of the pyramid into the sarcophagus, king's chamber. Had to be king, of course, didn't it? At the center of the tomb. And we had this guided meditation done in there. And I just lay down in Shavasana with my head against the wall in this most incredible place with unique sort of energy. They switched off the air conditioning, they switched off the lights, and there we were in Shavasana in this amazing place, just emptying our minds of worldly thoughts. And it was a brilliant thing to relax. I really, really felt very different when I came out of that meditation. We walked all the way back out. I think it took us about an hour to get back out. And I felt strangely connected to the people that I was there with. There were 12 other people, all Germans, didn't speak a word of English except for the leader. But I think it reminds me of the kind of connection you have with, when you finished a yoga class and you slowly start gathering up all of your things and you can't bring yourself to chatter, or so you really just want to savor that beautiful connectedness with yourself and with those people. Mm-hmm. And when I go to the gym place where I do yoga, I quite often scuttle out quite quickly because, through all these big noisy machines that are doing all the, pumping iron and all the rest of it, because I feel that lovely connection with people. And you can either get it in a yoga class like that, or you can get it in a meditation like the one that I described obviously you don't need to go to the pyramid to do it, but I think there's something about meditating on your own in a dark and quiet space that is really quite special.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And I think you've shared some really beautiful modalities for people. I love the idea of self-massage, especially when we can't be massaged right now. And I'm certainly excited for a time where we can have massages and acupuncture and cupping and all that good stuff. But you've definitely given some great tips for mental health and that sort of thing to do from home. Kay, I've loved this conversation. I'm curious, where can people go to find more about you, and if they'd like purchase your book or get in touch with you?
Well, the best place is probably my website, which is www.khutchison.com, and it's spelled Kayhutchison, khutchison.com. It's a Scottish spelling. Or if you can remember the book, I don't make it easy for people. My Life in 37 Therapies, From Yoga to Hypnosis and Why Voodoo is Never the Answer. And it's on Audible and it's on Amazon. You can find it really easily. And I think I'm the only person that's written a book called My Life in 37 Therapies. And it'd be lovely. It'd be lovely if you read it. But if you read it, you will see that yoga is a constant theme in my life. And I think it's just great that since that, doing all these different things, but yoga and massage actually are the two things that I think are really, really brilliant, grounding, relaxing things to do. So, and it's been absolutely lovely talking to you, Amanda. And I feel as if I'm with a group of really good friends, because if you like yoga, I like you.
Yeah, me too. I love it. Amazing. I'll make sure there's links to all that stuff in the show notes. And thank you again for your time today, Kay.
Lovely. Thanks a lot, Amanda. Bye for now.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Matcha Mornings. To find links mentioned in this episode, show notes, photos, and more, head on over to wanderbarn.com/podcast/matcha-mornings. To be the first to know about brand new episodes of Matcha Mornings, subscribe on your podcast app. If you enjoyed this episode of the show, please leave a review or send me an email at wanderbarn@gmail.com with the subject line Matcha Mornings. To follow along with me, Amanda Kingsmith, you can find me on Instagram at Amanda Kingsmith to learn more about other fun projects I'm working on. To find more great podcasts like this one on topics such as travel, the business of yoga, cryptocurrency, and more, head on over to wanderbarn.com. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you soon.